Could be.
Okay.
I'm
We
not
could,
seeing it live on the, maybe I might not be on the right link though, so I need to.
we could be streaming. I'm not sure. I don't have word yet.
Because I got it. You should warn me.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think we are.
So we're streaming now?
Yes.
All right, we'll get started.
Okay, so Brad should be joining us soon, right? Wait for
There's
Brad.
Akshaya. Hi, Akshaya. We haven't seen Akshaya in a long time.
Hi, nice to see you
Hi.
again.
Thanks,
How
Shai.
are you?
Good, how are you?
Good.
Yeah, Jackie just texted me. We are streaming, so anytime you guys want to get started, and I guess Bradley will just join us. Who's letting people in the meeting? We'll let him in when he gets here.
Okay, good. All right, so welcome to our May GRCC meeting. We're going to get started with intros here. We've got Jeff Jubileer with us. We have Vice Chair Amy Goldman. We have our administrative liaison, Michael Petiti, and we have our student liaison, Akshaya Bharat. Nice to see you. We're going to dispense with administrative remarks and move to public comment. Mike.
No public comment.
Okay. All right. Approval of minutes. We've had a chance to look at the minutes, and all looks good. Maybe we can just do a quick thumbs up on that.
Yeah, I wasn't there for the meeting,
Mm-hmm.
Chairman Babson, so I trust that you guys all looked them over and they went as they should have.
Okay.
Wasn't there either, but they look good to me.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. All right. So, Mike, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Okay, great. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our main meeting. And yeah, it is great to see you, Akshaya. So I hope you're doing well and finding that our remote learning is going okay for you. I wanted to get started here with our first agenda item, so I'll share my screen while we go over the communications during the pandemic here and the extended closure. So let me just pull up my. So let's see here. So you should see here the first slide, I hope, of the PowerPoint. And we'll move quickly into the first agenda item, which I mentioned was the role of communications in responding and adapting to the pandemic closure. So the first thing we'll take a look at is the kind of external communication, which would be mainly our website, our SchoolMessenger alert system, the newsletter, the Radar Reader, which is a weekly newsletter, and then our social media outreach. And what I like to show when I go over some of these, I guess, different materials we've been sending is the data. So I think it's important to take a look at the actual, the numbers of the analytics of people going to the site, what they're looking at throughout all the communications that we're doing here. So the first thing we did was create a centralized web page. And that's what you're looking at here. This is our extended closure web page, which we continue to update on a regular basis. And this is where we are hoping that parents and students and the public at large, community at large, goes to get the most recent information about how we're handling remote instruction as well as operations during the closure. And you'll see here on the left-hand side that there are other areas that people could go to get more information if they want to get more in depth about our special education services during this time, FAQs, etc. So taking a look at that page, which also includes some videos that have been made during this time from our special education department and generally across the district to hopefully pep some people's spirits as well, are available on this page. Secondly, we have a staff-only webpage that much of the public has not seen or should not be seeing, obviously, because it's dedicated to staff. This is behind a secure password. and here's some information that we have provided to our staff on a centralized kind of repository, so they don't have to hunt for emails or for different procedures and FAQs they might have themselves. They can hopefully locate them here, and if they need some answers to questions, they can email us, and we can at least be able to receive those and respond if possible. I'll note that another internal way of communicating with staff and parents has been, of course, our email system, but our Schoology system as well. Schoology, as you know, everyone I'm sure knows, or many of you know, is our learning management system where students and teachers and other staff members can communicate directly and share plans and receive assignments submitted from students. So we released some numbers about these communications through Schoology in recent weeks, and we got updated numbers, and I thought it would be interesting to kind of go over those. As I mentioned, data is important for us to share out around communications. And so when it comes
I'm so sorry, Mr. Petiti, I'm so sorry. Bradley is having trouble getting into the meeting, so I don't know who's controlling it, but he's in the waiting room. So I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but
Chris,
I'll let you know that.
Looks like he's in now, but he's muted.
Yes, I was following on YouTube, and now I am present. So thank you very much.
We like your background.
Thank you.
hanging out outside the admin building, it looks like.
So sorry. Thank you.
Michael, is there a way to make maybe it's my screen. It seems small because of my view, but I apologize.
The PowerPoint seems small.
Well, I'm looking, maybe it's my view and how hold on. Don't worry about it. I just fixed it. I apologize.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to get back to this internal page here where I was mentioning, and we're going to get deeper into the reader information and the other data in a little bit. I just wanted to give the overview of your external outreach and your internal, just to set kind of the stage there. In terms of Schoology, from the March 16th, which was when the closure began, through April 15th, there were 23,000 or so messages sent via Schoology to staff through a student or vice versa. And total now, updated numbers through May 10th, we've had 54,671 messages have been sent, direct messages since the closure. And the opening of Schoology, I should say, on March 19th is when our remote learning began in Radnor. We've had 73,000 or so course materials created. There were about 30,000 back on April 15th. And we've had 256,162 course materials submitted from students, which would be assessments, assignments, discussion, prompts, and tests and quizzes. And then back through 4/15, we were looking at 102,000. So you see those numbers there show that the type of communication that's being shared and different course materials and other lessons being shared through our learning management system, which I think is kind of helpful to refresh the public's memory about regarding those numbers. Moving on now to our analytics for our external webpage. Going through some of the numbers that we can pull here from our content management system, which is Blackboard, which we use to provide our website to the public, we can see obviously sharp spikes coming in through the beginning of February when we launched our public-facing coronavirus/extended closure webpage, and then the natural dip that you're going to see across the coming into April's May as the major news and what seemed like daily updates kind of fade a little bit, coming now into the current time. You'll see the number there of 37,000 or so views across all of the related pages associated with our extended closure sites and our coronavirus resource sites. And then they break down a little bit of your sub pages. So your main staff extended closure page on your lower right, and on the top right, what the public coronavirus information page statistics look like.
Hey, Mike, can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Are you able to tell how many unique visitors?
If we have the ability to do that through a Google Analytics plugin that we can use, it gives us a little bit more deeper dive into the data. This is just pulled from the analytics software built into our content management system. So I could get those, but they're just not represented.
Just curious in terms of its reach. In terms of families.
You're right. There's, I'm sure, many repetitive views, many of them being me, probably. So but we, in terms of unique, no, we couldn't pull those using this, but I could use them.
Is this the highest you've ever? Sorry, I shouldn't interrupt you. I apologize.
No, not at all. I mean, this is helpful.
Go ahead. I don't want to hold you up, but we can ask stuff afterwards.
Okay. Okay. Did you want me to keep moving, or do you want me to try to address?
Keep moving. Keep moving.
Okay. So then, we can also now look at our SchoolMessenger, which is our alert system. So the SchoolMessenger alert system is phone messages, emails, and occasionally we use them for text messages. Mainly we use phone and text. And you'll see on the left-hand side, gives you a little rundown of all the different subjects of matter that we've been kind of communicating about since the early February. This only takes us beginning at March 18th. But it gives you a representative sample. Across all of the schools and the districts, we've sent out 87 total messages, 52 from the district, and 35 directly from our schools accounts. So we've to points communicate to such an extent that we're trying to taper off some of the ways that we're doing that through email, maybe instead producing videos like the ones that I mentioned and showed you on that web page, especially from special education, trying to figure out different ways to communicate information to parents so they're not feeling like they're reading long emails, on a regular daily basis. We've also released about 11 phone calls over the course of the response to the pandemic. Moving on to the next slide, which will show you the Radner Reader data. So the Radner Reader, as I mentioned, is our weekly e-newsletter that gets sent currently to 3,221 subscribers every Sunday. And we're able to take a look at how many people are opening that, how many people are clicking on links within that particular edition. And so I put here just to show you some examples of some engagement that has kind of accelerated a bit since this whole situation in terms of people wanting to access our newsletter. You'll see the same period of time last year versus this year, certain spikes throughout the entire duration, and especially right in the middle there of when we were really responding to this and the data and the information was coming out fast and furious right there at the end of March. So overall, 50% opens, meaning that 1,633 or so people on a weekly basis over that course of time opened up the newsletter from their email and at least looked in there and read through information. And then we have about 17% people that did open that particular edition also clicked within the edition to read more information about particular websites that we had in the actual newsletter where they could go and get additional details. So wanted to just go over those kind of data. We also are able to pull exactly what people read in each edition. So it's been helpful for us to adjust what we're featuring higher up in the newsletter, depending upon the amount of clicks it's getting, or what we might want to feature more prominently because it's not getting as much attention, and we want to make sure that we try to give some more resources to giving that more attention to get those clicks. So this is really helpful for us to have this information. Social media, this is actually kind of interesting too. If you're kind of a data person like me about communications numbers, we're able to see, looking at our YouTube account, we're able to see kind of the viewership at certain times of when we release videos. So for example, our dancing video that happened to be pretty popular in the community, you can see that we 4,338 views since this was pulled, and then some different 161 hours of watch time on that video, and so a bunch of kind of data there that shows that there has been a little bit of a spike of people going to our YouTube channel including these streaming videos, committee meetings and board meetings, that we've had some more engagement with those videos and viewership than we're used to during this situation, which again, I think is to be expected in a way. The screenshots you see are the different videos that have been produced. Again, I mentioned two of the ones. I mentioned the one on the special ed supports for students and wellness supports. And you'll see the teacher appreciation video on the lower right, and then again, a screenshot of a streaming meeting that was recently held. We can also look at our Twitter and Instagram audience. So you'll see that over the 60, 70-day period when this data was pulled, 143,000 impressions, which basically means the time that your tweet was seen by somebody on Twitter, whether that just scrolling through their Twitter feed. And you also see there's an engagement number for each of those tweets. So you'll see that engagement number, which for the top tweet there, No School for Students, is 719. That means the number of times people actually clicked on a link or in some way expanded your tweet to see a picture that was embedded inside, somehow engaged with the tweet in a way. So it's nice, again, that we're able to see what's successful and also kind of have some validation that the social media activity that we do, including Instagram on the right-hand side, and the various videos we post, gets views and actually makes an impact with our public. And then lastly, moving forward, the 5 main things that as a communications office we're aware of with this ever-changing times is to remain responsive, to modify our website where necessary. So I have some good news on that end, that we've taken a really good look at our accessibility and recently have moved our translate button, which allows users, our English language learners especially, to translate every single page of our website. And it used to be only 10 languages. We were able to upgrade that to 100 or 150, pretty much any language that Google Translate supports. And we also moved that button to the top right-hand corner of the website, where it used to sit at the bottom left-hand corner, a little bit hard to locate for those families. So now it's kind of more easily accessible. So we made that change recently, and we're looking at other ways to modify certain content where it sits on the website during this time, what people are looking for. For example, we used to have the upcoming events right on the front page, a list of the calendar of all the events coming up. Well, sadly, most of those have been canceled now, so that real estate was reallocated for an extended closure information. And we'll keep looking towards ways to make those changes and adjustments to make sure people can get the information they need where they kind of expect it. And then, of course, creativity, innovation, and adaptation is our mantra, and we want to keep changing and adapting to the times, and we look forward to doing that. So I hope that was a helpful kind of rundown of where communications has been over the past 2 months or so.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mike. I think what we'll do is we'll hold off on questions until the end. There's a couple more agenda items, and then we can pool our questions at the end of Michael's presentation.
Okay. So if we're going to move on then to the next agenda item, and we can do the whole batch of questions if we have them at the end, it sounds like, we can then go right to the agenda item number 2, which was our passage on April 28th of this board resolution you see here on the screen to protect local funding and control. And then as a group, I thought we could discuss, and Mr. Babs, Dr. Babson and I thought we could discuss the expansion of the work that we might want to do in terms of advocacy for this position. And, as you can see here, we all went through this as a group, as a committee in, I believe it was, February, when we well, actually this one particularly was part of a new business. There were 2 other resolutions passed that we worked on originally in February that were also passed in April. This one in particular, we obviously brought it to the forefront because of the urgency of the subject. And now we're talking about what more can we do to, I guess, let people know that what's going on and how they might be able to help. So I open it up to the floor to have that discussion.
Any comments on this now, or you want to just save that till later?
Are you asking us, Dr.
Yeah.
Babson?
Well,
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking we could save till later, till we're done with this section, but if you guys feel more comfortable just kind of scrumming on this now, we could have a quick chat about it.
Well, the final agenda item,
Legislative update.
Update.
right? So, I mean, how long is it's up to you guys. I mean, I'm taking some notes on some things, so it's totally up to you what you want to do.
Okay, let's just move to the last item, Mike, and then
All
we'll
right.
kind of circle back.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then we were going to discuss. We can discuss this, and then lastly, we were just going to mention, which we typically do on these meetings, the legislative update, and let people know that there's an attachment that the Delaware County Intermediate Union provides that we pull a little bit of information from, and therein you can access that and look through what's been coming down recently. The major thing being the previous agenda item, which we'll discuss in more detail. And I can certainly pull up that legislative brief if we wanted to scroll through certain areas of it to take a look. But as we typically would do with these type of agenda items, we typically just mention that the brief is available as an agenda attachment. We ask the rest of the committee if there's any parts of that brief that they want to particularly discuss, and then we kind of, that's pretty much the extent of the discussion around that agenda item.
Sure. Sure. Okay. Well, let's circle back now that we're done with these. Let's just circle back to the PowerPoint, and let's entertain any questions or comments on the PowerPoint that Mike put together regarding district communications about our programming during the pandemic. Personally, just a quick remark on my part. I think it's fantastic that we have all these outlets of communication. I think that it helps the kids, the teachers, the staff, our entire district community feel connected during these times. I think it's quite difficult sometimes to feel like things are moving forward, that there is still learning and teaching going on, and that we are still a community, and that kids still, especially the students, still feel part of that community. So especially enjoyed some of those social media examples up there, Mike, and it's encouraging to see that people are engaging still. Mm-hmm. Any comments, questions? Let's kind of go around the horn here. Brad?
Thank you. First, as a comment, I agree with that sense of connectedness being so important. And from the presentation, I had a small sense of it, but it's just incredible to see how much our communications office has done to reach out to families and provide timely information, even as circumstances continue to change every day. So thank you for that. The only question I have is, have you heard anything from families regarding any families that are having issues with accessing all of the information that we're putting out there? There's even in Radnor, there's still a digital divide to some extent, and some families have less access than others. And if you've gotten any feedback along those lines, and if there are any strategies we're using to do further outreach, it'd be great to hear about those too.
Yes, of course. We kind of have gone in that have that thinking now with the addition of that button to the top right hand corner of the website, a couple other accessibility efforts we're working on that I don't want to quite get too much into detail yet, but are going to be exciting if they can come to fruition, that would enable people who may not, they're all online still, so that, they all do require that internet connection. Specifically from people emailing us or writing us, no, I haven't heard specifically someone saying, I can't get this. I have heard, though, that an itch to return to some sort of paper, some sort of mailer. And I think that that's something that, we should consider this summer and going into next year, to reach people that might not be certain about, the next steps here with what we're, how we're going to start in the fall, as well as to deliver information that's very important and very urgent for people to receive that, like you said, Brad, might not be able to download it easily from a website. So I think that's part of the adaptation kind of mantra, is that let's think of different ways we might want to reach people at this day and age.
One piece of feedback I hear is that people are inundated with so many emails, and there's just so many emails we're all receiving. And I think it's because there's so much that it's hard to read through the long emails, so we have had administrators doing more with webinars. We are looking at trying to do even more larger group meetings through Zoom. Mrs. Kevkis is looking to try to reach out to the seniors and do more of a large, class meeting. So we're trying to look at other avenues to get us away from the email. We're still going to need to do it, but that was part of the thinking why Michael created the frequently asked questions and also just the web pages with the information, so that people didn't have to keep going back through emails to find things. But that's the one kind of repetitive feedback I get from parents, is that they're just being inundated, and I can relate. I feel like we're all being inundated by working from home with just a lot of emails, and whether it's webinars, whether it's other ways we can communicate. I think we're looking at all those possibilities.
Yeah, well said.
Okay, great. Jeff?
Sure. Echo my colleagues' comments, Mr. Patidi. Just kudos to you. Kudos to Mr. Batchelor. The whole office, Allison. I mean, it's just terrific. Two questions. One, I wonder, and maybe this goes into my second question, is how many people access the information by their mobile? I feel like it's a digital divide question combined with people's preferences. And are we set up with our website, obviously social media is different, to have it appear to be mobile friendly? What's your take on that?
Jeff, are you in the field? It sounds like you might know what you're talking about.
No, I know. I think everyone is in the field in this group.
Yeah, that's true. This unique crew. You're right. I think.
So we've lost communications
Right, to our communications director.
Yeah, he's frozen in time forever right now, Michael.
You know what? Could we, while we're waiting for Michael, Jeff, not to interrupt you or step on you, Andrew, but I just want to, if it's okay with you, Chairman, Akshay, I'd be really interested in the student perspective on how she feels communication has been while we wait for Michael to come back from wherever he is.
Yeah, it's a good idea. Akshaya?
Hi. So I think it's really great that that the committee has communicated through social media, especially for teenagers, because that's the main way that we're communicating, and we're constantly on it, really. I think the biggest complaint that just in general the student body has seen is that there is a lot of emails, because whenever a message is sent through Schoology, it comes to us as an email and a Schoology notification. And typically they're very long, and we aren't, in our communication era, especially for teenagers, we're very we want it short and sweet, and we want the information very directly and fast. So I think that if we could condense how long a lot of the updates are sent to students are that could possibly help with more students engaging with these posts and just reading updates more often. additionally, I think that a mobile-friendly version of the website would be very useful because as it stands right now, it's not particularly mobile-friendly. And I think if a student or a family member does not have a laptop, they're most likely going to use a mobile device. So it'd be much more helpful to have that accessible.
Welcome back.
Sorry, guys. I don't know what happened.
No, thank you, Akshay. I think that was a good interlude because it validates and again, one of our most important stakeholder students. And I guess my follow-up question, Mr. Patidi, would be, you are so good. We're very good about asking people's feedback and opinions. Does it make sense? Have you thought about, or maybe we did one so recently and so much has happened that I can't recall, sort of asking people's communications preferences again, or getting a little feedback from the community to help inform moving forward. Again, that's on the cusp of what I believe to be, at least, and I think that our consensus here is just an excellent job overall in being platform neutral in terms of communication.
Thank you, Jeff. So just to quickly go back about the mobile, Akshay is spot on, Jeff spot on. We do see 80% of people are accessing it through a device. So maybe even more in some cases. Accessing our website, accessing the reader, accessing different other platforms. So it's extremely important that we do look at improving our website to be more mobile friendly. And I think as we discussed in the past about a website upgrade, times in finances have obviously changed, but that is top of mind when we're able to manage it, is to make it mobile first, or at least mobile the same as our current website functionality is. And actually, I take your feedback I'll take your feedback about the longer emails too. That what I can share out with some of the buildings perhaps is some sort of tidbits or best practices around crafting short, sweet, informational messages perhaps. But thank you for bringing that to our attention.
So I guess, is it okay if I jump in here?
Yep.
I think of Akshaya and her peers as sort of the Snapchat, TikTok generation. So when she says short and sweet, I'm sort of thinking in terms of 7-second sound bites. Is that about right, Akshaya?
I'd say keep it to maybe a paragraph long instead of several.
Okay.
So.
Do we try to do that with our board meetings too, Akshaya? Short and sweet.
We adults
you always link for more
that.
information.
But I just want to, I think that I've said this before, Michael, that from looking at and hearing from other districts, our communication efforts are tremendous. I'll tell you that I was on a webinar the other day with, I know this sounds strange, but the New Jersey chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics. They were doing a webinar on, surprise, surprise, adolescent sleep and school start times. And the gentleman who's the pediatrician and was running it he knew I was on the webinar, and he mentioned that he had been at that October conference we had and is still talking about the Radnor materials that were produced to show our story of sleep and school start times. And, that's a communications department product all the way resonating all the way in New Jersey. So,
thanks.
So, that's nice to hear. That was one of the things he took away from the conference, the speakers, but also the Radnor story and the way it was illustrated. To this day, as he leads the charge for this effort in New Jersey, he's using that as a really important resource and tool. So what I wanted to ask a few quick questions about the Radnor Reader. I came across a parent the other day who has 2 children in the district, and she was asking me a question that I know I had seen the answer to very vividly in the Radnor Reader. So I asked her, do you get the Radnor Reader? And she said, no, I don't think so. And I sent her the forwarded her the most recent edition. And I was just wondering if at some point in time it might make sense to do an inventory of how many of our families, as best we can tell, are actually getting the Radner Reader. It's such an incredible tool. I love how vivid it is now. It's really condensed, like you said. The stories that are at the top are easy to read. They seem to be the ones that are most attractive. It's nice and concise. So has there been any effort, or might there be thought to making sure that we are reaching as many of the families as we possibly can? Obviously, it's a voluntary subscription, but I'm just wondering if we have a sense of how many people within our school community are actually getting it.
Yes, I think that kind of connects to Jeff's point that I forgot to address about, checking with the parents about their preferences, and then alongside that, making sure that people are aware of the reader and maybe other tools that they might not be, familiar with. We can see, some population of our leadership has provided where their students go to school, and in some cases what grades those students are in. So we are able to pull some segments of the data to see how many people at Ithan are our subscribers versus Wayne. We haven't had those demographics and demographic information in place since the beginning of our launch of the newsletter. So we have a segment of the people who came on in the beginning that we just have their names. So there has been some discussion with our communications team about reassembling the list somehow so that we can get full complete data across all of the demographics we're asking for, as much as people want to offer as voluntary, of course, and at that same time trying to reach people who may not know about it, or getting a sense of who's not subscribed, and then directly emailing those particular people. We have enough data in terms of our student database and other databases where we could cross-reference and see who we're missing, and then send an email to those people that aren't subscribed. So there's ways to do it. It's just a matter of making the time and putting the campaign together to get it done.
And to that point, that would be an internal outreach, but I'm also thinking about the community at large, because a lot of times, and who knows what'll happen for us as a school district as we launch new initiatives or have different challenges we need to communicate. We don't have a local reporter for all intents and purposes anymore. Our local media coverage is pretty much non-existent now. Oh, there you went. So I'm just wondering also if you think it makes sense to create some outreach vehicles to try to get the larger community aware of what we're doing. It's such a good look. It has so much good information, and the things that we're doing in the midst of this crisis, I think, are so incredible to communicate. Maybe hooking up with other people who have distribution lists, like the library, the high school scholarship fund, the township. That's a whole nother segment of the Radner community that might or might not want to subscribe. But I'm just wondering if you've thought of, if you think it makes sense to pair up with those folks and see if you can get some additional readers that way.
Sure, they've we do have readership or subscribers from the township, so we can see there are some township employees that are subscribed. There are some other local school district staff members that are subscribed that we can see from their email handle. Several actually from different districts. We have some media members that are still subscribed from I think ABC at the top of my hand, maybe ABC might have been maybe somebody. 6 ABC, I think, maybe. And also NBC, other local channels subscribe. But you're right, there is value in letting the community groups like the Memorial Library know if they have a list they don't mind sharing out. I know Molly Gallagher, who's the public information officer over at the township. She's been really great with taking some of the information that might apply to all residents, helping us with her distribution lists. So certainly we could check in with those contacts of those groups and see if they have some way they could share out a link to subscribe.
Okay, because just as an FYI for the newsletter itself, when I was trying to find the subscription button to forward to this one woman in the community who didn't one family member, I couldn't find it that easily. So just as an point of reference on the Radnor Reader, maybe think about making the subscription link a little bit more visible so that somebody who isn't a subscriber, if you forward them an existing issue, they can easily subscribe.
Okay.
And just one other quick question about, have you happened to notice that since we've gone virtual with our board meetings, has anybody sort of tracked the viewership of our live stream meetings? Are as many people seeing us, not seeing us? Do you know anything about that?
Well, during the meetings themselves, anyone who is watching the feed can see how many people are viewing currently. So, for example, right now I'm seeing 9. So that's how we can kind of tell who's watching live. After the fact, those are those numbers I was showing on the YouTube analytics. You can see how many people are viewing or have viewed, even in real time, the videos. So I had noticed that, particularly our board meeting last month, had a good amount of views that I typically wouldn't see in a meeting. So, especially in that short period of time. Like if the meeting was 8 months ago and it has 300 views, that's one thing. But if it was last month's meeting and it already has 400, there's people who are watching who typically maybe won't.
Okay, well, thanks. Those are just my communications questions and comments. As always, I think the department does an incredible job. It's always a pleasure to share out some of the things that we're doing. People often ask, and you can share them out and feel really good about it because it's terrific work as far as I'm concerned. So thank you for all the efforts. Thank Allison also, because I know she's seems to be doing a fair amount of the support. So I think you guys are doing an incredible job. Communication is so important. So thank you very much.
I also want to give a quick shout out, if I could, just to Nikki too. She's in our video
Correct.
studio.
Yes.
She's really helping the high school in particular with some end of the year virtual celebrations that they're working on. There's going to be one coming out tomorrow night. Actually, the Junior Book Awards ceremony is going to be going live. I believe it's 7 o'clock or 6 o'clock tomorrow on our YouTube channel that Nikki filmed. There's going to be the Senior Awards night that she's working on. And of course, we're working on 5th grades. Moving up, we're working on 8th grade and some other of the senior events. So she's been great too. So I want to give her a shout out as well.
Yeah, well, Nikki had me hooked from the minute I saw my first pep rally. So if she could pull off something as unbelievable as that production-wise, everything else is, I keep forgetting that she's a member of the communications department, but absolutely, she's doing terrific work. And single-handedly, I've told people that the dancing video, I think I can account for at least 24 of the views myself. I sort of pop it on every time I feel a little blue. So yes, it's great stuff. So thank you.
All right, thanks.
Okay, excellent, Mike. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's move on now to the government relations. We've covered the C part. Now we're going to move over to the GR part and talk a little bit more about legislative issues. First off, any discussion points for the resolution that we passed last month? I'd just like to open up the floor. Let's start with you, Brad.
Thank you. I think we, covered a lot of this material previously. Some of this, I think, also is reflected in comments we just had in the finance committee that ran a little late, leading to the late start here. Our apologies for that. But what led to that is we have a situation now where we have perhaps the most uncertain budget environment the Radnor Township School District has ever faced before. And with that financial background, maintaining the ability to have local flexibility and autonomy over our financial decisions is so important. And so I think that's a big part of what is underlying a lot of the advocacy that we've been putting forward in resolutions like this and ones on other topics as well. I think we're trying to do the best that we can for kids in our district, but also wanting to be responsible to the taxpayers. But ultimately, we 9 board members are the ones who are accountable to our local to the public. And so it's up to us to make these hard decisions, for better or for worse, even in the midst of all this uncertainty. And so we want to advocate for our ability to continue to do so as we move forward under these circumstances.
Great. Jeff, comments?
Sorry, I was muting and unmuting. Ditto, first of all, to Mr. Moore's statements. Resolution, if we could amplify that resolution in any way we could, to give it color, to give it life. We as a board, we as a community, we as a school board, we as all school boards across Pennsylvania and all school districts are in dire straits. So it's incumbent upon all of us. And this is not an easy, it's easy to say, freeze property taxes. You're done. Sounds great. Bradley did it very succinctly, but it took him 2 minutes to get out why that's ridiculous. I guess if we realize that Radnor, amongst other districts, and I'm sure Amy will expand upon this, we're going to be losing millions upon millions of dollars due to this crisis. And due to the mandated costs. I mean, this isn't, I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but for the public to know, yeah, I think it's important that, as Bradley said, that you elected us and we're going to have to make some tough decisions, and with all information and all voices heard. And it's very uncertain right now, but it's incumbent upon us to get out there and state our position and back it up and be smart and be informed. We spent some time, I'll let Amy talk about it more. She was very engaged, as the rest of us were as well, but she in particular helped spearhead several meetings with legislators in Harrisburg virtually over yesterday and the day before, or today and the day before. We feel good about our current legislators who represent Radnor, but unfortunately they only have a certain amount of votes. So it's incumbent upon us to try to reach those who may not feel the same way across the state and the power that they have. So our work is cut out for us, and we have a lot to do between now and June 30th.
Well said, Jeff. Thank you. Amy.
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. All right. Akshaya, any comments on this particular issue?
No, not right now.
Okay, no, it's fine. All right, good. And then finally, there's the legislative update from DCIU. I know there's some overlap in that update on the property tax issue that Michael brought up. But there are other issues brought up in that legislative update from DCIU. Any comments or concerns related to that particular document? I'll just open up the floor to anyone.
Andrew, I'll just make one observation, and then, if others have anything to say, or we can move on. But sure. I'm really heartened to see there are, first of all, with this board is particularly engaged in advocacy work, and we always need it, I think. Unfortunately, public education has had its share of detractors in recent years, and so we always need to be out advocating for public schools and the education we can provide our students. But I'm really heartened to see this board engaging so actively in advocacy, and I just want to thank everybody for their support in those efforts. And it's nice because I also see the same thing happening in districts around the county. People who never sat on the sidelines and really didn't do anything to help us advance the cause are now jumping in with both feet. And it's really wonderful to see. So I want to thank this committee. I want to thank the board at large, and if anybody else from any other school district out there happens to be watching, I want to thank them too, because it's nice to be with all of us doing this together. We can make much more of a difference.
Yeah, it stands to mention for the public who might be watching that our board has been very vocal in supporting legislation that promotes local control. And as Jeff and Brad said earlier, especially in these times of financial uncertainty, and not just around the corner, but projecting 6, 12, 18 months out, it's especially important for local districts to have that kind of financial agency and control. Good. Other comments on the DCIU update? Okay, why don't we move to new business, because I think following up on what Amy was just talking about, yesterday there was a virtual advocacy day sponsored by the PSBA. And although I did not attend that, I understand that Brad and Jeff and Amy all attended that virtually. And so I'd love to open it up to comments and even some descriptions or thoughts on that event to everyone.
Thanks. I think I can start with a bit of an
Bradley, could you jump in? Oh, sorry, just jump in. I'm going to jump.
Go ahead, Mr. Batchelor. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. And thank you. You've moved over. I can see the banner. I love your background, by the way, and it's got the banner in there, which is nice. I'm going to jump off just because I got another meeting, so I apologize for jumping off. So I'll let you guys wrap up this meeting. So I just wanted to let you know I was jumping off, but thank you.
Thanks, Ken. All right, so as Dr. Babson said, we did have what was described as the first virtual advocacy day for the Pennsylvania School Boards Association. There was originally going to be an in-person visit of advocacy in Harrisburg on March 23rd. For obvious reasons, that in-person advocacy day did not happen. The advocacy day was then rescheduled for May 11th, yesterday, with a follow-on meeting today that Mr. Jublier already mentioned. So what this meant specifically was we had a series of Zoom meetings with representatives that cover Radnor Township in one way or another. So and we had an agenda that was one that the Pennsylvania School Boards Association put together based on their legislative team put together, and it was centered around 3 different topics, which all of which are themes that have come up one way or another, both in this meeting and in the Finance Committee meeting that you might have viewed as well. One was advocating about the Pennsylvania budget, with the message being, on the one hand, we know that Governor Wolf had advocated for some new basic education money and some other money to be in the budget. And understanding that the state of Pennsylvania is potentially facing a $4 billion, yes, that's right, $4 billion budget shortfall for this coming budget cycle. What we were advocating for was at least not on the backs of kids. And I know there are a lot of people who've worked with the state legislature before over the years. Mr. Jublier can probably speak to this. There's not a lot of discretionary money in the state budget, so it's that's still a hard point to advocate for, but it's one we really believe in. We think that even if there's whatever discretionary cuts there may have to be, not in education, not this time, especially after what happened after the 2008-2009 recession. So that was the first point that we were bringing to the legislators. The second point was around the idea of reforming the funding mechanism for charter schools, and for substantive information on that, in a previous GRCC meeting, we talked about a resolution that we put forward along on that topic as well. So I won't reiterate those points, but the idea is that the funding that charter schools receive should more rationally fit what their actual costs are for educating students, so that extra monies aren't going from public schools over to charter schools beyond what's actually needed to educate those students. And so even in these times, if you had in these times on your bingo card, I think we've all said it a few times in the meeting tonight, but even with the circumstances we face, we still think that charter school reform is an important point for the legislature to consider. And by the way, that's one, even though it represented a lot of what Governor Wolf had set out as potential additional funding for school districts, reforming the mechanism for charter school funding doesn't necessarily have to exacerbate that $4 billion potential deficit. So even if the state is struggling for money, this is a way to help public schools out when they're facing uncertain times without necessarily putting an additional burden on Pennsylvania taxpayers. And along those lines, the third bullet point we were pushing with the legislators was the idea of some kind of mandate relief. There are certain, and just as with the state, with school districts, so many of our costs are set. There's not a lot of discretionary funding, and some of those costs are costs that the state could relax for districts, perhaps potentially with a waiver authority, which is something that used to exist under Pennsylvania law. So whether that's something that moves forward permanently or for the short term in light of the crisis, some kind of flexibility around mandated spending is something that we were looking for from the state. And so we brought this to 3 different Zoom meetings. The Radnor delegation attended 3 particular meetings. The first one was with Representative O'Mara, representing the 165th House District in Pennsylvania. Also with the Radnor delegation, there were representatives from Springfield and Marple Newtown at that meeting. Then we had another meeting later in the day with Representative Vitale, representing the 166th District. Haverford representatives attended that meeting as well. Representatives from the Haverford School Board and also Haverford Superintendent of Schools. And then we had a third meeting in the day with Senator Leach, representing the 17th Senate District in Pennsylvania, with representatives from Haverford, Radnor, and Norristown. Finally, we had an especially unusual opportunity this morning, continuing the advocacy additional day, to have a meeting with 4 different state senators that were covering at least part of the Delaware County, any school in Delaware County. So that included Senator Carney of the 26th, Killian of the 9th, Williams of the 8th, and then Senator Leach of the 17th once again. And for that meeting, the focus was a little bit less on the 3 bullet points of advocacy that I mentioned earlier. Actually, Haverford Superintendent talked a little bit more along a theme of what are some of the new costs that we're seeing? What are some of the new shortfalls in revenues we're seeing? And what are districts doing? What are districts doing now? School buildings are closed, but education is happening. And the superintendent of Haverford Township School District spent a lot of time walking those 4 state senators through a lot of what our situation looks like. Closing the loop then, some of that presentation also talked a lot about what is so uncertain now and what the state legislature could do for districts as we move forward to take both an uncertain financial picture, but also an uncertain logistical and regulatory picture as we move forward towards the fall. What will school look like in the fall? The more clarity we get sooner, the better. And that's another point that emerged in discussion in those sessions. So that's a brief summary overview, and certainly any of Mr. Jubilee or Ms. Goldman who had particular experiences of the day they'd like to highlight, I think that'd be worth sharing with the public now as well.
That was really good. Thank you, Brian.
I'll just go briefly because I'd like to cede my time to Amy, Ms. Goldman, because she, I know, attended this and more meetings, and I attended some of the meetings. I would just suggest it was nice to hear, particularly what Bradley said about this morning's meeting, because it was bipartisan. Many of our representatives and senators in this part of the state happen to be Democrats in the state legislature. Democrats are in the minority in both the House and the Senate. Unfortunately, and not everybody, but a large part of this, unfortunately, comes down to a partisan situation. The governor certainly has been someone who has been supportive, and we're counting on that support again. We may feel good, but we've got to keep the noise going and keep our great advocacy work along with our peer school districts going strong. But to talk to Senator Killian in Delaware County, Republican, who I think was very open to hearing our thoughts and representing us and so forth. We need to talk to all sides and continue this work. And so I think I'm going to cede now to Amy, who spearheaded many of these meetings.
I really don't have much to add except to say thank you guys again for your engagement with this. We had a meeting with our 4 Delaware County state senators. Hadn't happened before. I have to give the credit for that idea to Senator Carney's Chief of Staff, Sarah McCullough, who's become a regular attendee at our Delaware County School Board's Legislative Council meetings. She's very invested. That office is so supportive of our efforts as a council and just public education in general. And it was her idea. She coordinated the 4 senators. We actually, as a council, Larry and I just got all the other school board folks and administrators there. So there were 64 people across Delaware County, 64 school officials, superintendents, school administrators, school board members, almost every district in the county represented. And like Jeff said, it was a bipartisan experience, both in terms of the legislators and the school officials. And there was another call this afternoon with Representative Chris Quinn, who doesn't tend to make himself, unfortunately, all that available to some of his districts. But I think, like I said, there's a real appetite among people who haven't particularly been in the advocacy orbit before to do something because of what we're facing, as Bradley alluded to, in unprecedented economic circumstances and what that means for public schools. So people are jumping in and getting their feet wet in advocacy, and it's really nice to see all of that happening. So we're going to keep it up. This is not a one and done kind of advocacy day. It's called Advocacy Day by the School Boards Association, but it's really just the beginning of what the kind of work we have to do between now and when the state passes its budget and then beyond, because I don't think that everyone seems to think that this economic conundrum is not short-lived, that this could last for quite some time. And we have to keep educating our lawmakers on how crucial it is to fund public education. I mean, much of what we're doing when we say advocating is that we are explaining to them as boots on the ground exactly what their state appropriations and federal appropriations, when we're talking to that audience, are going to, because they don't know. I mean, it's some of the things that we heard from some of these legislators were, it justified our time because they didn't understand exactly what it is that we're doing day in and day out. We're not just providing education, we're feeding students, we're making sure they're safe, and we are not saving boatloads of money that allow us to take these massive reductions in subsidies or these other economic hits. So we can't take their understanding of how we operate our schools and what our needs are for granted. That's what advocating is about, is telling your story. And there are going to be some really neat opportunities coming up, which I'll share with you guys in a little bit, not tonight, but at another time, but some other neat advocacy opportunities that I hope will be a part of as well.
And thank you. And I just want to add also that school directors Monahan and Duffy were also in attendance. So we had a substantial representation from Radar. Make sure they get credit as well for their advocacy. Yesterday.
And Stern.
And Ms. Stern, thank you.
It's great. Last year I attended Advocacy Day with Chuck and Amy and others, and it really is a wonderful event. And I do regret that I could not participate this year, but I'm so thankful that so many of you participate. As Amy said earlier, it does say quite a lot about our engagement in these issues, and just our engagement also with our representatives. So kudos all around. So we're going to wrap up here in a minute, but I wanted to kind of mention just something very briefly, kind of a pivot issue.
Excuse me, Dr. Babson, for one second, the resolution, do you want me to mention that quickly as the new business item I had given you a heads up on?
Oh, right. Yep. Ben Salem. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And then I know we have another meeting, so I won't make this long, but I just wanted to mention that the Ben Salem School District passed last week a resolution urging the General Assembly to maintain its investment in public schools and students, meaning in this day and age, initially before the pandemic hit, the governor was proposing some, not a large amount, but some additional money to what the legislature had given us last year in terms of state funding for our schools. And the governor was proposing a modest increase for this year. I think most of us are pretty sure that that an increase is out of the question given the multi-billion-dollar projected deficit the state is going to be facing. What we're really investing our energies in at the moment is holding the line on what we had last year. And the Ben Salem board was proactive and developed a resolution to make the case for why the state should hold its funding from last year. And today there was a call, PSBA has been hosting these weekly Zoom meetings for school board leaders in Section 8 and for their corresponding school board PSBA liaisons within the board. And the Penn Salem board member who brought this to my attention was on the call today because she's a PSBA liaison for Ben Salem. And she mentioned this resolution, and there are about 50, 60 people on the Zoom, and it went over really well. I mean, a lot of people were saying when she brought this up, hey, can you send me a copy? Can you send me a copy? Can you send me a copy? So I bring it to you as a matter of information that this resolution is now circulating out there. And if it's something that you think we'd like to perhaps craft and put together in time for our business meeting, I mean, we didn't get it in time to really vet it thoroughly here in committee, but I just wanted to put out there that this is a possibility if we'd like, in the interest of time, to put this together. I wanted to see if any of you were interested in that.
Mike, I think we could probably put our heads together on that one, and any other members of the committee, we could just start an email or some kind of communication so we can brainstorm together on that. But I think it's an excellent idea, Amy, and obviously there's a lot of good reason to have such a resolution, given the reasons that you laid out. So I think
this one is fitted to Ben Salem's finances, so we need to do some recrafting. But if this committee feels it's worth the effort, I think you have an electronic copy of it. Am I correct? Did I forwarded it to you, Mr. Petiti and Dr. Babson?
Yeah, double check.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess if the committee is so inclined, that could be revised and circulated to see if we should present it as an item for the full board at the end of the month.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I think we'll proceed in that direction for sure.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, great.
And Dr. Babson, I know you had one more item. One other thing I just really wanted to emphasize, whether someone from the public is watching now or later, and I know we said we had 11 viewers. I apologize. I'm actually one of the 11 because I'm keeping track on my phone of what we look like on screen. So, but if anyone's viewing later, as much as we are out there advocating with our representatives, if you're a member of the public, if you've had an experience with online learning, if you've seen the work that's gone into what we've been able to do, if you're worried about the fall, we need you too. And so, certainly you could get in touch with any of us for information about how, as a member of the public, you could also advocate on behalf of education in our state too. So we are all in this together, and we would be happy to facilitate and give information to members of the public through this meeting, so that you can also reach out yourselves on behalf of your family, your district, what's important to you.
And that's well said. Yes, thank you.
Dr. Babson, just quickly, I just wanted to see, I don't want to put Akshay on the spot, but if there's anything she quickly wants to weigh in on or not about what she's hearing about legislation, advocacy, et cetera, any questions she might have?
I don't have any particular questions at this time, but I think the resolution is something that should definitely be presented to the full board at some point. Good, thank you. Just one quick point that I wanted to make while we're on the topic. Because of this pretty significant time that we're dealing with, I think it's important to note a couple of brief points. Now, there is some personal opinion here, but I think that there's a general consensus that our public health officials in Pennsylvania are quite highly regarded. The second point I want to make is that we as a district, for those of you who are watching, if you weren't sure before, hopefully the presentation that Mr. Petiti gave tonight will sort of reinforce the idea to you that we are watching the situation, that as a board we are aware that we are making decisions, taking into account all of the best information that we have available, and that we as a district are fully committed to communicating as much as possible and as clearly as possible whatever we are digesting or analyzing as a board and as a district. So I just wanted to
to put that out there. Any final thoughts, Mr. Petit?
No, I second that entirely, and I show those numbers not to pat communications on the back by any stretch, but to let people know that we are trying to be responsive and be aware of what people are looking at, so we can adjust accordingly to meet the needs. So that's kind of why we keep track of those numbers, and we're happy that people seem to be responding to our communications and our information positively.
Okay, excellent. All right, folks, we are adjourned. Thank you very much.